everyone, I come to you with tomatoes. So today we are going to be talking about non-flower related content, but instead we're going to be talking about preserving tomatoes and specifically a more efficient way of preserving tomato for canning, like sauces and other things that you might do with tomatoes. Things that I've learned over my short tenure of preserving, but with some tips that I got from other folks when it comes to freezing. So I thought this would be a good video to share. Now, growing vegetables is really what got me into flower farming. So tomatoes are near and dear to my heart because we eat a lot of tomatoes in the form of sauces for various different types of cuisines that we cook at home, like Indian, Italian. We make a lot of pizzas and all that stuff. So growing tomatoes and being able to freeze a quantity of sauces was a high priority for us this year, despite having a baby and wanting to increase our flower farm production. So I wanted to do a video on this because for the 3 years that I've been preserving tomatoes, I've been doing it fresh. And the problem with doing it fresh is, one, it's more time consuming, but two, your tomatoes may not all come in at the same time. So it's also very time inefficient from that perspective. The ability to freeze and leave it all for a day like today, it's a rainy day, it's not a great day outside, makes it so much easier for us to do it in batch. But beyond that, the other thing that I came to realize was that when you are using frozen tomatoes to start the process of canning, you save a lot of time because the water will naturally start evaporating out into the pot, and you will see this later, and it saves you a lot of time when you're cooking down the sauce. So there's various ways of canning. This is just one way that has been working for us this year and that I found saved a lot of time. So a couple of things to note before we start the process, or I start showing you what we've been doing. Most of these are paste tomatoes. So we grew probably about, I would say, 30 tomato plants this year. Maybe about a third of that were beefsteak, and then the other 2/3 were paste varieties. So this is a San Marzano paste. They actually come in indeterminate plants too, as well as determinate. So the difference is that for determinate, you get your harvest all at once. For indeterminate, you get them throughout the entire season. There's pros and cons to both because one, you get to harvest all at once, and the other is this continuous harvest. So paste tomatoes are better for sauce making because there are less seeds and there's less water in them, so it just makes for an easier canning experience. What I did before freezing was I washed them and then I sliced off the bits of the top and the bottom, and I just read that this would be easier for us to peel off the tomato. I've seen people do it just throwing the whole tomato into the freezer without doing anything, and it's also fine. So again, multiple ways to do this, but the thought process is that when you freeze the tomato and then you thaw it, the skin will then naturally get wrinkled and want to come off more easily, and then you will have a release of water, right? Because tomatoes have a lot of water. You will get a release of water in the pot, at which point you can dump out, and then that will also expedite the process for you to simmer the sauce and evaporate that liquid. So I've got about 4 of these bags. Each of them weighs about 4.5 to 5 pound bags. It's a very reasonable amount for a small grower to achieve this amount. Now, of course, we've canned along the way. And when we can with fresh tomatoes, typically you're spending a lot more time scoring the tomato and then blanching the tomato to get the skin off. So one of the things that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna time how long it takes me to process about 20 pounds worth of tomatoes and let you know in comparison what the time saving is by going through this process. So let's get started. So I just timed all of that. All of the 20 pounds of tomatoes are in this bowl right now. They are defrosted and ready to be de-skinned. That took about 35 minutes with a lot of multitasking within that 35 minutes. And that is really, really exciting because in the past, when I did this without freezing tomatoes, it took way longer than 35 minutes. And I will say that preserving is romantic and fun until you start the process and you're like, that is so much time. So this is already such a great time saver, and I'm just super thrilled with how this is going already. So there you have it. This is what the result is. We got 12 of these 12-ounce cans. I was hoping we'd get a little bit more. Last time when we did 20 pounds, we got close to 11 cans. And the difference is that this is a much more reduced sauce. So remember, we had all that water evaporate, then we let it simmer for another hour on the pot. So it's a much thicker sauce than what we had last time. And the great part about this frozen process is that so much water comes out before you even start reducing that you don't have to use as much gas and time on the stove to get a thick sauce. The other thing I want to note is that we just use a water bath. So you saw me put a little bit of lemon juice in here instead of citric acid to help preserve it, but a water bath is enough for tomatoes. We use a pressure canner type of pot because it's just big enough to be able to put all the cans and is high enough to do so. But we usually use the pressure canner for things like chicken stock. So at the end of the day, was it worth all this time for 8 cans? Maybe not, but preserving is not something you can place a value on. It's just something that we enjoy doing, and it makes, I don't know, just makes a home cooked meal feel even more homey because you knew exactly how it was grown. Next year, I'm going to do a much better job of staking my paste tomatoes. This year, I only staked my beefsteak tomatoes. So, you know, success and unsuccessful stories that came from the staking and the trellising, but next year I'm going to try to do a much better job and hopefully be able to freeze even more tomatoes. So throughout the entire season, 8 plus, I would say we got tomato sauce for at least 10 more occasions. That brings it to like 18 times when we're cooking over, I would say, a span of 6 months that we've been able to use our own tomatoes, which is a pretty good win for me. We have a lot of space, so there's a lot more potential to grow from this, but you got to start from somewhere, and it's totally fine if you start small. So I hope this video was helpful for you, whether or not you're a flower farmer or not. There are so many great videos out there on how to can specifically. I kind of skip through all of that just because I don't need to be repeating that kind of information. But let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.